I want you to picture two people, same income, same city, same rent. The first person earns £45,000 a year. Their flat is full, a wardrobe of clothes, most worn twice, kitchen gadgets still in boxes, a spare room quietly turned into a storage unit. They check their bank account with a knot in their stomach, one unexpected bill away from trouble. The second person earns £45,000 a year. Their flat has space, a wardrobe of clothes they actually wear, a kitchen with exactly the tools that get used. They check their bank account with calm, 14 months of expenses saved, investing every month without thinking about it. Same income, one financially stable, one not, and the difference has nothing to do with how much they earn. This is not a story about budgeting. It is a story about a psychological trap most people never realize they are in, and the minimalist money rules that get you out of it. Before the rules, there is one concept you need to understand, because without it, none of the rules make sense. Everything you own costs money twice. The first cost is the price on the receipt. Obvious. The second cost is the one nobody calculates, and it is almost always larger than the first. The second cost is storage. Space costs money. That treadmill is not just a treadmill. It is 20 square feet of floor space you are paying for every year you own it. The second cost is maintenance. That car you upgraded too soon needs insurance and servicing, whether you use it or not. The second cost is mental energy. Research shows visual clutter raises cortisol and reduces the brain's ability to focus. Your possessions are not just sitting there. They are making quiet demands on your attention every day. And the second cost is opportunity cost. Every pound locked into possessions is a pound not compounding somewhere else. Most people think the price tag is the cost, right? It is the entry fee. The real cost is everything that comes after. Once you understand that, the rules become obvious. Rule 1. Calculate cost per use before you buy anything. Before any purchase, estimate honestly how many times you will actually use it. Divide the total cost by that number. That is the only honest measure of value. Most people look at the price and ask, can I afford this? The question that actually matters is this worth what each use will cost me? A 200-pound jacket worn twice costs 100 pounds every time you put it on. A 400-pound jacket worn 200 times costs 2 pounds per wear. The cheaper jacket is the expensive one, right? The price tag told you the opposite of the truth. This calculation destroys most impulse purchases immediately. That 300-pound kitchen gadget you will use twice a year costs 150 pounds per use in the first year alone. Meanwhile, a 30-pound tool you use every week costs less than 60 pence per use. The math cuts through marketing and emotion. It just asks what this actually costs you every time you use it. Rule 2. Apply the replacement test to everything you already own. Walk through your home and look at each item. Ask yourself one question. If this disappeared today, would I spend money to replace it? Be honest. Not the version of honest where you think about who you used to be. Honest about who you actually are right now. Would you replace the bread maker, the fondue set, the clothes you have not worn in 18 months? For most items, the answer is no. You would not replace them. They exist through inertia, not intention. They arrive through impulse or obligation and stayed through the simple fact of already being there. Most people think they own their possessions, but possessions you would not choose again are not things you own. They are things that own a piece of your space, your attention, and your time. The replacement test makes the decision simple. Not, is this worth keeping? But would I choose this again? Those are very different questions. The second one is much harder to answer dishonestly. Rule 3. Never upgrade out of boredom. There is a pattern in people who earn decent incomes, but have little to show for it. They replace perfectly functional things because they are bored with them, or because newer versions exist. The television works perfectly, but the new model has marginally better contrast. The phone does everything it needs to do, but the new release has a slightly improved camera. The car is reliable, but the new model has different styling. These upgrades feel like progress. They are wealth destruction in disguise. Psychology calls it hedonic adaptation. The brain returns to a baseline level of satisfaction regardless of what it acquires. The new thing produces a spike of novelty and then flattens back to normal. So the brain starts looking for the next new thing, not because anything is lacking, because the novelty has been absorbed. Most people think upgrading improves life, but research consistently shows that after a short period, the upgrade feels exactly like what it replaced. You are not buying a better experience. You are paying to reset the novelty timer, right? And that timer runs out at the same speed, regardless of how much the thing cost. An item is functional until it genuinely cannot do the job. Boredom is not failure. Desire for novelty is not failure. The existence of a newer version is not failure. Everything else is the upgrade industry asking you to pay for a feeling that disappears in a month. Rule 4. Design your environment for saving, not just for spending. Most people try to control spending through willpower. They tell themselves they will be more disciplined, more careful, and they are for a while. Then they are tired or stressed and the willpower is not there. Willpower depletes. Environment is constant. People who are consistently financially stable do not rely on willpower more than other people. They design friction into spending and ease into saving so that the right choice is always the path of least resistance. Spending friction looks like removing stored card details from online retailers, deleting shopping apps from your phone, requiring a 24-hour pause before any non-essential purchase. Saving ease looks like automatic transfers on payday before you see the money, keeping only a small amount in easily accessible accounts, treating saving as a fixed expense rather than whatever is left over. Most people treat saving as what happens after spending. Minimalists treat saving as what happens first. That is a completely different relationship with money, and it does not require more discipline. It just requires building the right system once. Rule 5. Define enough before your income grows. Here's the trap that catches almost every high earner. They never define what enough looks like. So as income rises, lifestyle rises to meet it. The new level becomes normal. The cycle continues indefinitely. People earning $300,000 a year feel the same financial pressure as people earning $80,000 because their expectations expanded alongside their income. The number changed, the feeling did not. Most people think more income automatically means more stability, but without a defined ceiling, income and spending rise together and the gap never grows, right? Defining enough creates a finish line. Without it, you are running a race with no end. The person who defined enough at $40,000 of annual spending and then started earning $100,000 builds wealth fast. The 90,000-pound gap goes directly to financial freedom. Someone earning the same $100,000 but never defining enough might save almost nothing. Rule 6. Calculate the ecosystem cost before any major purchase. Every significant possession connects to others. A boat requires a trailer, a vehicle capable of towing it, storage, insurance, registration, and maintenance. You did not buy a boat, you bought into a boat ecosystem. Most people price the item. They do not price the ecosystem. When you add the ecosystem cost to the purchase price, decisions that seemed reasonable often stop looking reasonable. A 5,000-pound purchase with an 8,000-pound ecosystem attached is a 13,000-pound decision. Most people only evaluated it as 5. This works in reverse too. Eliminating one major possession often eliminates an entire category of ongoing cost. Sell the boat and the trailer, the storage, the insurance, and the maintenance all disappear with it. The saving is much larger than the item's value. Rule 7. Measure your wealth by what you can choose, not what you own. The conventional measure of wealth is visible. Houses, cars, possessions, the markers other people can see. Minimalists measure wealth differently. They measure it by optionality, by the choices available to them. Can you leave a job that is damaging your mental health? Can you take time away to deal with a family crisis? Can you say no to work that compromises your values? Can you absorb a significant unexpected cost without it becoming a crisis? Can you retire before 65? These choices are real wealth, and they are only available to people who have built a genuine gap between what they earn and what they spend. Most people want the freedom that money can buy while also buying everything money can buy. You cannot fully have both. Every purchase is not just an exchange of money for an object. It is a trade of optionality for possession. Is this thing worth reducing your ability to make free choices about your own life? Sometimes yes. For most purchases, the honest answer is no. Rule 8. Review your possessions regularly, not occasionally. Most people who attempt to simplify their lives do one big clear out, feel a lift in clarity, and then gradually accumulate back to where they started within 2 years. The clear out felt productive. The reaccumulation happened too slowly to notice. Minimalists avoid this through regular small reviews rather than infrequent massive purges. A weekly awareness of what is coming in, a monthly look at one category, a quarterly check on overall accumulation. Removing 3 things a week is manageable and sustainable. Removing 300 things once a year feels overwhelming and gets delayed indefinitely. But the deeper value of regular review is the awareness it creates. When you look at your possessions consistently, you notice patterns. Which categories keep growing? Which emotional states trigger buying? Which marketing tactics work specifically on you? That awareness allows prevention rather than just treatment. These rules are not about deprivation. They are about something psychology has shown consistently. The need most consumption is trying to meet. The need for security, for status, for the feeling that everything is fine, is far better met by financial strength than by physical possessions. When your savings are growing and your investments are compounding, the urge to accumulate diminishes. You do not need the stuff to feel successful because your bank account is already telling you the story you want to hear. Most people spend to feel financially safe, but spending is the thing preventing the financial safety they are spending to feel. That is the trap. And the only way out of it is to see it clearly enough to stop. That second apartment, the one belonging to someone earning $45,000 with 14 months of savings, belongs to someone who saw it. They did not get there through exceptional income. They got there through exceptional clarity about what actually matters. If this video gave you something to think about, share it. And if you want to understand more about the psychology of how we make financial decisions, the next video is already there for you.